everyone, I'm Dagmar Velez from Civic, here with my colleague Trang Giang. Today, we're sharing how we've used automation to improve validation workflows for Colorado's APCD annual files, specifically APM, DR, and VBPC. We'll walk through our process before and after automation, show a lightweight demo, and share some practical tips and lessons learned. And with that, I'll pass it to Trang to give an introduction on the annual file validations.
Thank you, Dagmar. Hi, everyone. Like the title of the presentation, we have the APM or alternative payment model, DR or drug rebate, and VBPC or value-based pharmaceutical contracting are included in our automation process. We have other files in our annual file suite, but these are the ones we have automation implemented currently. These are non-claim-based files submitted in text or Excel format, depending on the file type, and contain 3 or 4 years of data. Next slide. Each of these files have their own unique validation checks, but there are some common ones. Current submission versus previous submission, current submission versus APCD data, and year-over-year trending analysis. These checks are all broken down by year, IPT, or line of business. Next slide. Before the automation process, we had a script that we ran manually, which included several CSV files loaded in as temp tables. We then copied and pasted the results into Excel and entered our own notes for the payers to review. Each of these steps were then repeated if there were resubmissions. Because of that, it took over 200 analyst hours every year to complete the project. Not only that, these data have reporting requirements that have very tight deadlines. And of course, any manual process would introduce human errors and inconsistencies, hence the need for automation. Next slide. So last year, Civic created Python script that give the analyst the ability to plug in variables for payer, file name, and reporting year to run. This automation process not only has reusable functions, flexibility on adjusting the thresholds, it also helps standardize the language throughout the QC and automatically paste the result into Excel. Thanks to that, Civic was able to cut the validation time in half, which allows the analyst additional time to fully review the results in a meaningful way. So now I'm going to pass it back to Dagmar to give you a quick demo of the automation.
Thank you, Trang. Now I'll walk you through a quick overview of how the automation works from start to finish. First, here's what you'll need to run it. Annual files saved in a consistent folder structure, an Excel quality check template for validation results, a Jupyter notebook, and some basic Python knowledge. However, this automation can also be done in other programming languages, but our demo uses Python. In this example, we're working with one file submitted by payer code 0000 in 2025. It includes 3 reporting years, 2022 through 2024. Here's what the raw annual file looks like, which you can easily replicate. It's a pipe-delimited text file with fields like payer, IPT, year, and total spend. On the right, you can see that the folder setup is key. The files need to be named and organized consistently by payer and submission year. This is how the Python script knows where to find what it needs. Each payer folder also includes a copy of the Excel QC template. This is where all validation results will be pasted automatically. In the Excel QC template, we have multiple tabs, a validation results tab, as shown here, and one for each validation type, which summarizes the data. For this demo, we're focusing on the reporting year comparison validation, which is in orange here. This checks for year-over-year changes within the current file. You'll notice that the automated results will be pasted in column E on the very right. And here are some screenshots of what the other tabs would look like for the summarized data for your reference. Now to the Python setup. At the top of the notebook, the analyst enters variables like the payer code, file name, submission year, and reporting years. Then, the text and Excel files are read in using the pandas package and formatted strings like F with the curly braces, which lets us pull in the correct paths dynamically. We also connect directly to the Colorado APCD database using the Vertica_Python package, which lets us compare the submitted data to what's actually loaded in the warehouse. Once the data is loaded, we reformat it to make comparisons easier. For example, we pivot it so each year's total spend becomes its own column. We then use validation logic to build repeatable functions. Here's one that checks if total spend changes more than 20% year over year. This code in particular is a little bit trickier to complete, and you will need at least some basic programming knowledge to complete. but I included some tips and tricks later on to help you get here. Once validation is complete, the script uses the OpenPixel package to paste the results directly into the correct cell of the Excel template. No copy paste needed. And here's what the final result looks like in that E column. A clear pass-fail message that includes the percent change and dollar difference. Easy for the analyst and payer to see exactly why the validation has failed. And so with just a few steps, we've taken a time-intensive and error-prone workflow and made it fast, repeatable, and far easier to scale. Now I will go over a few quick tips for if you're building your own automations. First, start with your script with clear instructions for analysts. Things like how to organize file structure, variable names, and data formatting. A markdown cell at the top of your Jupyter notebook works great for that. I've also listed here all of the packages I've used for our automation. You'll likely need the Pandas, OpenPixel, and Vertica Python packages in particular. If you're new to Python, Corey Schaefer's Jupyter Notebook tutorials on YouTube and the Python Crash Course books are great starting points, but there are so many other great resources out there. Just find one that fits your learning style. You can also use ChatGPT to help write and debug your code. I've included a prompt example with output here. Just avoid pasting in any PHI and always test the outputs. Think of it as a coding partner and not a replacement. And if Python isn't your thing, similar automation can be done in R, SQL, or even tools like SAS and Stata, depending on your environment. And now I'll pass it over to Trang for our lessons learned.
Thank you, Dagmar. To conclude the presentation, here are some lessons learned we collected throughout the process and recommendations if you want to build your own. The biggest hurdle that we ran into was the formatting issue of the Excel files that ended up breaking our automation. To resolve this, we would recommend that you have intake checks for these Excel files, or better yet, request these files as CSV when possible. A living knowledge repository with common errors and how to fix them would also be beneficial. And as a rule of thumb, it's always good to have more than one resource with basic programming skills in case your lead programmer is not available to troubleshoot. Next slide. Additionally, we recommend that you fully establish your validation checks and acceptable variances early on before the automation. Like the output example shown, including both percentage and raw numbers in your result would help providing better context for the analysis. For example, 50% difference for only $300 might not be significant enough to pursue. Thirdly, start with simple checks before adding on more and utilize the nuances you learn from the manual process as insights to improve the logic of the automation. You should also have a version control system in your organization to track changes and avoid overriding working scripts. And lastly, CIVHC's annual file automation is a standalone process, which gives the analyst the flexibility to run or rerun files whenever. However, if you want to incorporate this into your overall data solution, pay attention to the schedule of your APCD data warehouse refresh, especially if you compare the non-claim-based data versus APCD, since your APCD numbers might change pre and post data refresh. Next slide. Finally, here are some other use cases for automation. Keep in mind, if you have done it more than twice manually, it might be worth automating. Back to you, Dagmar.
Thank you all so much for joining. If you have any questions about Python or building automations, feel free to reach out to me, Dagmar, at the email below. And if you have questions about Colorado's APCD annual file validations in general, you're welcome to contact either of us. We're both happy to help.